The Mississippi sun cast long shadows over the pine forest of Taylorsville. A lone figure, weary and wary, walked through the desolate road, glancing over his shoulder. He told his mother, "They're after me." Days later, his dismembered body remains would be found scattered in those very woods. His name was Rasheem Carter, and the question still haunts Mississippi. What happened to Rasheem? And why does the truth remain so elusive? Welcome to Cigar and A Crime, broadcasting from the Lounge of Truth. I am your host, Dr. D, and whether you're East Coast, West Coast, or Deep South, or anywhere in the world, thank you for tuning in. Tonight, we delve into some harrowing modern mystery out of Mississippi. So whatever you're doing, take a moment, open up your humidor, pull out your best smoke, light it up, and let the aroma curl around you. It's time to put some smoke in the air because we're about to dive into some true crime. But first, let me set the scene with tonight's featured cigar. Here in the Lounge of Truth, I've just lit an Oliva Series 5 Millennial. My favorite cigar. This cigar's 2014 Cigar of the Year is a box-pressed beatty with a Ecuadorian wrapper and rich Nicaraguan fillers. The first draw is smooth and bold, notes of cedar and espresso, with a hint of dark cocoa and pepper on the retrohale. There is this creaminess in this smoke that belies its strength. The Millennial burns slow and even, its ash firm, its character robust. As I savor its earthy, complex flavors, I think about symbolism. How the process of lighting a cigar is a ritual of patience. Not unlike painstaking search for the truth in this case. Each puff kind of releases this swirling gray ribbon that dances in the light, reminding me that the smoke, it never lies, baby. In this story, amid a haze of half-truths and official denials, we'll rely on the evidence, the smoke, to guide us to the truth. So join me as the lounge fills with the smoke-fragrant haze as we embark on episode 1. The smoke never clears. The mysterious death of Rasheem Carter. Tonight, we explore the harrowing case of Rasheem Carter, a 25-year-old black man from Fayette, Mississippi, a man with dreams, a father, a son, whose life ended under circumstances that remain shrouded in mystery and controversy. This is not a story of a death. It's a story of a community's demand for answers and justice. Rasheem Carter was more than just a name in the news. He was a son, he was a father, a friend, a dreamer. At 25 years old, he hailed from the small town of Fayette, Mississippi. Just to give you a little bit of history about Fayette, it's the county seat of Jefferson County, which is located in southwest Mississippi. It sits along U.S. Highway 61, roughly, about 28 miles northeast of Natchez, about 42 miles southwest of Vicksburg, which is about 100 miles southwest of Jackson, the state capital. Just to give you a little bit of context, this has about 1,600 residents. Majority of those people are African American. Historically rural and agricultural, with many of those residents usually commuting to larger nearby cities for work. It's also known for its role in the civil rights era struggles. Jefferson County was heavily affected by segregation and voter suppression. Fayette actually made history in the late 1960s and early 1970s when Charles Evers, the brother of the slain civil rights leader Medgar Evers, became the town's first black mayor in Mississippi. Just to give you a little bit. Those who knew Rasheem described him as ambitious, hard-working black man, an accomplished welder and millwright by trade. He was a gifted cook with these entrepreneurial aspirations. In fact, Rasheem's mother said Rasheem was clocking or making $100K a year. Rasheem had opened a seafood restaurant in Fayette, lovingly named after his 7-year-old daughter, in which I will not name. So the restaurant ended up closing during the COVID-19 pandemic, but Rasheem was so determined to save his money and reopen it to fulfill his dream of being a successful business owner. He doted on his little girl, calling her every day on video chat when he was away, listening to her endless stories and letting her fall asleep to the sound of his voice. By all accounts, Rasheem was a devoted father, hustling to build a better life for his family. And late in the summer of 2022, Rasheem accepted a short-term contract job through a company called Clements Mechanicals and working at a Georgia Pacific lumber mill in Taylorsville, Mississippi. So in Taylorsville was nearly 100 miles from his hometown, but Rasheem was willing to travel for steady work. Unfortunately, his car ended up breaking down in September of 2022, leaving him without reliable transportation. That has all happened to us, right? Still, Rasheem didn't let that stop him, though. Every day he commuted 20 miles each way between Laurel and Taylorsville, often hitchhiking or catching rides along Highway 37 to get to his job. And then back to the Super 8 motel in Laurel, where he was staying every day. Some days he even walked miles on foot when no ride was available. Imagine the dedication and resolve it took to do that, to stand in that sweltering Mississippi back road heat with his thumb out, or trudge along the shoulder in this sticky heat, all because you're determined to provide for your family. That was Rasheem Carter. But in Taylorsville, which is a population of about 1,300, Rasheem was very much an outsider. This is a small, insular town in the deep South, a place of pine forests, churches, and long memories. It lies in Smith County, right next to Jones County, an area that was once an epicenter of the Ku Klux Klan activity during the Civil Rights era. Today, Taylorsville is about 2/3 white and 1/3 black by population. Yet old racial fault lines still run deep. Confederate flags aren't an uncommon sight on pickup truck bumpers. Black residents of the region carry a generational awareness. There's an understanding that in certain rural Mississippi towns, a black man from elsewhere might draw a suspicion or hostility. Rasheem, a young black man from Fayette, stepped into this uneasy atmosphere simply trying to earn an honest living. Almost immediately, trouble found him at the job site. Rasheem confided to his family that he had faced harassment and conflict at this contracting company. And it really bothered him. On October 1st of 2022, Rasheem sent an ominous text message to his mother, Tiffany. In it, he wrote, "Me and the owner of this company are not seeing eye to eye. If anything happens to me, he's responsible for it. He got these guys wanting to kill me." This is what he wrote to his mother. His mother would later reveal that Rasheem even named the individuals he feared in the text, effectively giving his mother a suspect in case he turned up dead. This chilling message laid bare Rasheem's state of mind. He felt targeted and in danger, specifically because of tensions with a white superior at work. Rasheem also told his mom that some of his co-workers were out to harm him. that the situation had racial overtones and he was terrified they would do something to him. Imagine receiving this text from your child. Tiffany Carter told him to be careful and assuring him that they have figured something out. But Rasheem's instincts told him he might not have that much time. He was a black man in fear for his life in rural Mississippi, and sadly, he had good reason to be afraid. Rasheem's last 2 days alive were a frenzied fight for survival. The timeline is complex, and some of these details remain a bit murky. But what is known from family accounts and surveillance evidence paints a picture of a man desperately trying to escape harm. On October 1st, 2022, Rasheem was still working in Taylorsville and staying in Laurel. That morning, he hitched a ride toward work with a roommate or acquaintance. But an intense argument erupted between them during the drive. We don't know what the spat was about. Maybe Rasheem's rising anxiety or something unrelated to this. But it was so serious that Rasheem decided to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way. You know that had to be serious. He was left on the side of the road somewhere along that 20-mile stretch between Laurel and Taylorsville. Alone and on foot, Rasheem pressed on. To tell you the kind of person this boy was, this young man was. At some point along Highway 37, a few of Rasheem's co-workers actually spotted him trudging along and then picked him up. They gave him a short lift into town, dropping him off at a Family Dollar store in downtown Taylorsville. It was a little after 10 a.m. when Rasheem arrived at the Family Dollar. So he gets inside the store. Rasheem immediately called his mom. Tiffany said he sounded panicked, and he told her that he needed a ride, and he wanted to leave Taylorsville right away and get back home to Jefferson County, even though that was over 100 miles away. Sensing the urgency in her son's voice, Tiffany promised him to arrange help. She told Rasheem that his aunt, who lived relatively nearby, would drive to Taylorsville to pick him up and take him somewhere safe. Rasheem agreed to wait at the Family Dollar for his aunt's arrival. But during that call, something bizarre happened that only heightened Rasheem's fear. While he was in the store clerk received a phone call. And Rasheem heard the clerk answering, and the caller was asking if Rasheem Carter was in the store. The clerk, perhaps not realizing the danger, looked at Rasheem and said into the phone, "He's in here." And Tiffany later recounted his disturbing moment. Rasheem told me that he left the dollar store when he heard the clerk say, "He's in there." That's what his mom told him, because he realized someone was actively checking on his whereabouts. Think about that. Rasheem is in hiding, essentially, waiting for a ride, and suddenly a fucking phone call comes hunting him down by name. We still don't know who placed that call, but Rasheem clearly believed it was connected to the men threatening him. And terrified that his pursuers now knew his exact location, Rasheem fled the Family Dollar immediately. He called his mother again, this time a full-blown panic. "They're after me," he told her. "3 truckloads of white guys are trying to kill me." He reported that these men had been following him in a pickup trucks and even shouting racial slurs as they chased him around Taylorsville. We can only imagine Rasheem's terror in that moment, alone in a hostile place, convinced that any second a lynch mob was going to descend upon him? Tiffany was frantic on the phone, gave her son the only advice she could think of. Go to the police station right now, is what she told her. And she later said that I felt in my heart they would serve and protect my son like they are obligated to do. It was the logical move to get law enforcement, find a sanctuary until help arrives. Rasheem agreed at approximately 5:30 a.m. on October 2nd, 2022. Rasheem Carter walked into that Taylorsville Police Department lobby seeking refuge. And according to this video, it appears Rasheem may have had two separate visits to this local police department, possibly once on October 1st and once in the early hours of October 2nd, pleading for help for both times. The exact sequence is a bit unclear, but what's important is that he tried more than once to get protection from authorities. What happened to Rasheem reached the police is a point of fierce controversy. According to Rasheem's family, Taylorsville police turned him away. His mother later said once he made it to the police station, he said some men were trying to harm him. He asked if he could stay and wait for his ride, and they told him no. Officers allegedly told Rasheem that he couldn't stay there. It was a small department, not a shelter, and that they had no jurisdiction to give him a ride back to Laurel, which was in a different county. In other words, not our problem. One of Rasheem's aunts, Miss Felicia, later said that police claimed that Rasheem didn't even act like he was in danger and that he never explicitly said he was being chased. A characterization the family strongly dispute. I fucking strongly dispute. Taylorsville Police Chief Gabe Horn maintained that Rasheem only asked for a phone charger and a ride, not protection from attackers. But whether Rasheem explicitly said his words or not, it's undisputed that he went to the police for help, and he left without it. The result was that Rasheem walked back out into the pre-dawn darkness of October 2nd alone, with the threat he feared still looming over him. Sometime later that morning, around 10:15 a.m. on October 2nd, Tiffany spoke with her son by phone one last time. Rasheem's cell battery was nearly dead, down to about 1%. But he managed to drop his GPS location for his mother before the call cut off. Tiffany told him, "Hang tight, your aunt is on the way." A trusted family friend headed towards Taylorsville to retrieve Rasheem. But when they arrived, Rasheem was nowhere to be found. It's as if he vanished in the span of those minutes after the call. The friend searched, called out for him, nothing. Rasheem had disappeared. The last known sighting of Rasheem Carter was captured by a trail camera deep in the woods outside of Taylorsville later that day, on October 2nd, around about 4:32 p.m. A property owner's hunting camera, which was strapped to a tree, snapped a series of images that have been since seared into the memory of all who've seen them. In one photo, Rasheem is shirtless, braving the thick woods alone. The most jarring image shows him running through the trees, looking over his shoulder, clutching a large branch or a stick in his right hand. His facial expression, to the extent one can tell, looks strained, perhaps even in pain or exhausted. His clothes appeared disheveled. And the family members who examined this photo, they said it looked like he had bruises on his body. Rasheem's cousin, Tasha Clark, said it seemed like Rasheem was hiding or defending himself when that picture was taken. She said, I think it was a struggle. Rasheem was trying to protect himself. He was hiding. Indeed, Rasheem's likely grabbed that tree branch as a weapon, a last resort to fend off anyone or anything that was chasing him. This trail cam image is haunting. It's a broad daylight under the canopy of oaks and pines. Rasheem's eyes, you can quite make them out, but you sense his fear. It truly looks as if he's being pursued and is desperately trying to get away, deeper into the woods. Those woods will soon become the resting place for his bones. After October 2nd, Rasheem was never seen alive again. His distraught family reported him missing to the Laurel Police Department by the next day, October 3rd, since Laurel was where he had last been staying. Word got out around Taylorsville that a young black man was missing in the area. These small search parties made up of family, volunteers combed parts of the woods areas over the following weeks. Tiffany Carter and relatives drove the rural back roads themselves, calling Rasheem's name, praying for a miracle. But as days turned to weeks, hope waned. Then on November 2nd of 2022, exactly 1 month after Rasheem vanished, the mystery took a gruesome turn. Rasheem Carter's remains were discovered on a tract of private land in a wooded area south of Taylorsville. It's not clear whether a local resident, a haunter, or the search parties found him, but the authorities were alerted immediately. What they found was deeply disturbing. Rasheem's body was not intact. In fact, he had been dismembered. According to subsequent autopsy reports, Rasheem's head was severed from his body. His spinal cord was found in a separate location from the rest of his remains, and many of his body parts were scattered or missing entirely. His remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, essentially skeletal, suggesting that he had died some time ago and that scavenging animals had likely disturbed the body. But dismemberment, especially decapitation, is not a typical outcome of simple, most modern animal scavenging, as of any forensic expert would attest. To Rasheem's loved ones, the condition of his remains was a screaming red flag that foul play had occurred. My son was lynched, Tiffany Carter insisted. He was lynched to the highest capacity. Yet, astonished, local law enforcement first public statement on Rasheem's death brushed off any suspicion of a crime. The very next day, on November 3rd, the Smith County Sheriff's Department posted a brief statement on Facebook announcing that Rasheem Carter's remains had been found and added, "At this time, we have no reason to believe foul play was involved." What some bullshit. So the sheriff, Joel Houston, who I've reached out to, by the way, told the media that early evidence didn't suggest anything nefarious. In other words, The official stance right after discovering a decapitated, mutilated body was essentially no obvious crime here. Probably just animals or natural causes. The black community in Mississippi, and indeed anyone paying attention, was stunned by this pronouncement. How could a young man end up in pieces across a forest with no foul play suspected? As Jefferson County NAACP President Ricky McDonough later put it, how can it not be foul play when his body was dismembered? How can it not be foul play when his body parts were scattered all over the land where he was found? Rasheem's family flat out rejected the sheriff's implication that perhaps animals were solely to blame. They knew wild hogs or coyotes might gnaw on remains, but they don't dismember a person with precision. And animals certainly don't chase someone through the woods in trucks. To Kit Tiffany Carter and her relatives, the suggestion that no crime occurred was not only ludicrous, it was insulting. It felt like a callous attempt to sweep a potential lynching under the rug before an investigation even got off the ground. Outrage simmered as weeks passed, with little more information from officials. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation was said to be assisting Smith County in this case, and the FBI had been contacted to provide that support, but no agency stepped into that to take it over. The case remained in the hands of Smith County Small Sheriff's Department, the same department whose first instinct was to downplay foul play. Family members grew increasingly suspicious that authorities weren't pursuing this case aggressively. The sheriff's office insisted in a generic statement that they had shared all the details with Rasheem's mother. And if the family wanted more released to the public, that was up to Tiffany. It was a bit of a strange deflection, implying we know what happened. We told the mom. If she wants it public, that's on her. And in reality, Tiffany was begging for answers. By the end of 2022, the Carter's family grief had transformed into determined activism. By that time, in December of 2022, nearly 3 months after Rasheem's disappearance, they began to organize protests in Taylorsville to demand transparency. It was a gloomy, drizzly New Year's Eve morning when a couple of dozen people, family members and friends and local activists, gathered on the steps of Taylorsville Police Department. Tiffany was the embodiment of righteous fury and the heartbreak, a mother who felt betrayed by the system that should have protected her son. During that protest, Tiffany began to share more about her son's final hours as she understood them. She confirmed publicly that Rasheem had gone to the police for help and been refused on October 2nd. She told them that Rasheem feared for his life. She said that painfully. How she encountered their last call, his dropped GPS pin, and how a family friend arrived only to find Rasheem was gone. As Tiffany spoke, other grieving families stood with her in solidarity, including the mother of Damian Cameron, a 29-year-old black man who had died in Rankin County in 2021 after an altercation with deputies. Another case where Transparency was in question. The pattern was painfully clear to everyone gathered there. Black lives were in danger, and Mississippi authorities were too often responded with denial and indifference. Under mounting pressure, the Mississippi Crime Lab finally allowed Tiffany to view her son's remains in February of 2023, more than 90 days after his body was found. Due to this ongoing investigation, Rasheem's remains had not been released to the family for burial for 3 months, compounding their anguish. When they saw what was left of Rasheem, it confirmed her worst fears about the brutality he'd suffered. She and the family then proceeded to lay Rasheem to rest in February of 2023. Rasheem's funeral was held at a little church in Fayette. Tiffany cradled her son's skull and spinal cord, which the coroner returned to her in a box after the autopsy. It's hard to even fathom that scene, a mother having to collect her child's body parts like a goddamn jigsaw puzzle, because no authority was treating his death as a homicide. The official autopsy from the state medical examiner was completed in February of 2023, did little to clarify matters. The cause and the manner of Rasheem's death were listed as undetermined. The medical examiner noted that the condition of the remains, skeletal with some separated, and evidence of animal scavenging made it impossible to definitively ascertain how he died. Essentially, they could not even rule out trauma due to the deterioration of Rasheem. This was not surprising given the state of the remains, but it was still frustrating for the family. It meant officially there was no medical confirmation of homicide, even though common sense and circumstance all screamed murder. The autopsy did confirm the extensive dismemberment. Rasheem's cervical spine had been detached from his skull, but it didn't declare those injuries were caused by a weapon or a human action. For Rasheem's loved ones, undetermined was just a sterile word that didn't match the horror they knew he endured. Then in March of 2023, Tiffany and her attorney, famed civil rights lawyer Ben Crump, held a press conference in Jackson to publicize Rasheem's case and ramp up pressure on authorities. Indeed, on February 23rd of 2023, the Mississippi Crime Lab identified a second set of remains discovered somewhere in the vicinity of the first site as belonging to Rasheem. This suggested that whoever killed Rasheem might have spread out his body parts or that animals dragged them, either scenario pointing to foul play followed by an animal activity, not a mere accident. And Crump, he didn't mince his words. Standing beside Rasheem's grieving mother, Tiffany, he said, "What we have is a Mississippi lynching." To hear the term lynching invoked in 2023 sent a chill through many observers. But Rasheem's family and supporters felt it was warranted. The historical echoes were undeniable. A black man goes missing in Mississippi, found brutalized in a rural area. And the local police shrugged it off. It was like a page ripped from the Jim Crow era, except it was happening today. National media began picking up this story around this time. It was compared to Emmett Till, You guys remember the 14-year-old black boy lynched in Mississippi in 1955. A professor of African American Studies at Emory University, Carol Anderson, stated that the Rasheem Carter's case evoked memories of Till's murder and underscored this lingering reality that black people still struggle to get their killings taken seriously by authorities. The image of Mamie Till in 1955 crying over her son's mutilated casket is seared into America's consciousness. And here we are, Tiffany Carter in 2023, weeping over a box of her son's remains. As Dr. Anderson put it, it defies logic that someone who said he was being followed ends up dismembered, and the police say no foul. But put this in an anti-blackness frame, and it's absolutely logical. In other words, if you understand the historic pattern of denying black suffering and protecting white perpetrators, the official response to Rasheem's death, the quick dismissal, the lack of urgency, fits an ugly lineage. Lynchings in Mississippi never stop, says civil rights lawyer Jill Colin. These evil bastards just stopped taking photographs and passing them around like baseball cards. The Jefferson's organization documented at least 8 suspected lynchings of black men and boys in Mississippi since 2000. 8 cases in which black individuals were found hanging or dead under mysterious circumstances that authorities wrote off as suicides or accidents, despite strong family objections. Among them, I just want to name some of these. Renard Johnson in 2000, 17 years old. Nick Taylor, 2003, age 23. Frederick Jermaine Carter, 2010, found hanging from a tree in Greenwood, Mississippi. Otis Byrd, 2015, 54 years old, hanging from a tree in Claiborne County. Willie Jones, 2018, found hanging from a tree in Scott County. These families had to beg for federal intervention. Rarely was it granted. And even when the FBI did an investigation, as in Otis Byrd's case, the deaths remain officially suicide due to lack of evidence. This is the haunting backdrop against which Rasheem's fate unfolded. The pattern is so consistent, it is hard not to see Rasheem as part of a continuum, a 21st century lynching, as activists have called it, carried out under the cover of the Mississippi woods instead of in front of a mob. Back in Jackson, Mississippi, during a March 23 press conference, Ben Crump and Carlos Moore called on the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate Rasheem's death as a federal civil rights case. They invoked the recently passed Emmett Till's Anti-Lynching Act of 2022, which finally made lynching a federal hate crime. Perhaps Rasheem would be the test case for this new law, they hoped. America, you cannot turn your head away, Crump implored. We need the highest levels of law enforcement to administer justice for Rasheem Carter. As if he were your own child. The pressure on federal authorities began to mount. The FBI, for its part, stated in mid-March that it was not involved in the Carter's case, deferring to state investigators. The MBI said it was assisting Smith County but offered no comment, citing the open inquiry. It appeared no agency had yet taken the step of classifying this as a hate crime or a civil rights violation. It was still a suspicious death on paper. However, the Civil Rights Division had the case on its radar as of March of 2023. In other words, federal officials were aware and monitoring this, but had not yet launched a full independent investigation. As spring turned to summer of 2023, Rasheem's case remained unsolved. In April, Tiffany Carter and Ben Crump announced that the Mississippi Crime Lab had finally identified the second set of remains as Rasheem's, the ones found in February. Yet no suspect had been named. The Smith County Sheriff maintained that nothing was being swept under the rug and that they had no evidence of foul play at this time. It was an almost surreal disconnect, the family shouting murder and lynching, the authorities effectively shrugging, "We can't prove a crime." By October of 2023, 1 full year since Rasheem's disappearance, Tiffany Carter reported that she had not been updated by investigators for months. She still didn't receive all of Rasheem's remains for proper burial. Some portions were presumably retained as evidence or still being searched for. Rasheem's little daughter was traumatized and confused. She would sometimes text her daddy's phone, "I love you," or play old voice messages just to hear his voice. Imagine explaining to a 7-year-old that her father's killers have not been caught, or worse, that officials aren't sure anyone killed him at all. Rasheem's daughter has withdrawn in school and keeps asking why no one helped her daddy when he was so scared. Why indeed? This is what the question that haunts this case. Even now, in 2025, the FBI and the DOJ, they have not announced any intervention at all. The case technically remains with Mississippi authorities. Perhaps new evidence will emerge. A hunter finding a weapon, a witness coming forward, maybe DNA on recovered clothing, something that could finally catalyze an arrest. But as of this recording, Rasheem Carter's death is officially unsolved and officially a terrifying open secret. Those who knew Rasheem believe a group of white men literally hunted him down in those woods, dismembered him, and have thus far gotten away with murder. And they fear that without sustained public attention, Rasheem Carter's case would be quietly filed away. Just another black man whose life was deemed disposable. Sitting here, cigar in hand, I feel the weight of Rasheem's story heavy on my chest. I am a native son of Mississippi too. I grew up under that same blistering sun in the embrace of those dense woods and red clay roads. I know the pride and the peril that comes with calling Mississippi home. For black folks, Mississippi is a land of rich soil and rich culture, but also of nightmares passed down through generations. I've heard the elders whisper about old times, about sheriffs who sooner lie than seek justice for a black man, about the unspoken rule that certain roads you just don't walk down after dark. As I draw on this cigar, the smoke, it coils upwards. I can't help but picture Rasheem on that lonely road, heart pounding, head on a fucking swivel. He did everything a person in danger is supposed to do. He called his mother. He alerted his family. He even went to the police, for God's sake, y'all. And still, somehow, he ended up dead in woods, his body parts torn. That reality is so damn painful and infuriating. It challenges any notion that if you just follow the rules, you'll be safe. Rasheem followed the rules, and he's in his grave. I think about Tiffany Carter standing on those court steps, screaming for transparency. I think about his little daughter who will have to grow up with a photo of her father she'll barely remember, and a story that will haunt her more with each retelling. Why didn't anyone help my daddy? How do you answer that? The honest answer? Because America still has places where Black lives are not valued, where the institutions that should protect you might turn you away. That is a bitter pill that a child should never have to swallow. And I have to be honest, as a Mississippian, as an American, this forces me to do some soul searching. And this story, this pain, it hits me harder than I can even put into words right now. It's 2025. We like to think we've come a long way from the days of Emmett Till. In many ways, we have. But Rasheem Carter's fate forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The past isn't dead and buried. It's alive and festering in the shadows of today. There are still sundown towns. There are still people who will chase a Black man out of their community and maybe do the unthinkable if given a chance. There are still officials who will find every goddamn excuse not to hold those people accountable. That's the reality Black Americans live with, especially in the South. It's not paranoia. It's lived experience backed by centuries of history and, sadly, current events. For Mississippi, the state with the nation's highest number of recorded lynchings in history, acknowledging this reality is crucial. It's only when these kinds of cases are dragged into the light, when we name them, investigate them properly, and demand justice, that any change is going to actually happen. Think of the outrage that finally brought justice for Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia in 2020. Think about that. It shouldn't require a viral video or a national media storm to get justice. But time and time again, it does. Rasheem's case hasn't yet seen anyone arrested. But the fact that we are talking about it, that you're listening to a podcast about it, means it's not forgotten. It means Tiffany Carter's fight is not in vain. As I look at the ember of this cigar glowing orange in the dim light of this lounge, I recall one more chilling detail Rasheem's mother said at the press conference. They thought this was going to be a child no one cared about. They're clearly mistaken because he was somebody. That resonates so deeply with me. There's this cynical calculus that sometimes happens with cases like this. The perpetrators count on the victim being marginalized or nobody's raising a fuss. They thought Rasheem was just some poor Black worker from out of town, someone they could make disappear and it's barely registering. But Rasheem was somebody. He was loved. And now he's become a symbol of racism unaddressed, of a justice system's failure, but also of a community's resilience and refusal to let his memory die unnoticed. We end each episode here in the Lounge of Truth by reflecting on the cigar we've shared and the story we've heard. This cigar tonight I smoked is now just a nub in the ashtray. It's once white ash, now a crumbling gray. The room is clouded with a final haze of rich, lingering smoke. And in that haze, I find a metaphor for Rasheem's. Smoke is honest. It reveals. When a cigar smoke hangs heavy, you can't ignore it. It forces you to notice. Likewise, the truth of what happened to Rasheem hangs in the air, despite efforts to obscure it. The authorities may have tried to clear the air with talk or of no foul play, but the smoke tells a different story. A story of suffering, of a crime unpunished, of a mother's intuition that her son was hunted down. I recall how in the old days, Mississippi black folks would say, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." Well, the smoke surrounding Rasheem Carter's death is signaling a raging fire of injustice. We must not let this signal go unseen. The fight for answers continues through journalism, through legal pressure, through activism on the ground in Mississippi. People are coming together to insist that Rasheem's life matters and that his killers, if they're out there, be brought to justice. As I snuff out the last embers of this smoke, I leave you with the tagline of this show, a reminder that in all matters of the truth and justice, the smoke never lies. The smoke never lies, and neither do the broken hearts of a family that knows something evil was done. It's up to all of us to keep blowing that smoke. Figuratively speaking, to keep raising the hard questions, challenging the official line and amplifying stories like Rasheem's. And I wonder, deep in my soul, if Rasheem Carter had been someone else, someone who did not even look like you or me, would he still be here? You can dress that any way you want to, but the truth drifts like smoke. In America, some lives are protected, and some are just explained away. Rasheem deserved better. His family deserved the truth. And we deserve a country where every man, no matter the color of his skin, can walk down a road in his own state without fearing for it. It'll be the last road he ever walks. Tiffany Carter, we hear you. We see you, sis. We won't stop until justice is served. And to my true crime podcasters, this story is not proprietary. I want to thank you for joining me tonight in the Lounge of Truth for this difficult, necessary story. In our next episode, we'll delve into another perplexing case that challenges our understanding of justice and fairness in America. Until then, stay vigilant, keep seeking the truth. And if you like when up in contemplation, remember, sometimes the smoke tells the real story, and the smoke, it never lies. Good night, and take care.